Hello guys, welcome back to the Road to Recovery podcast. I'm your host Tommy with my great illustrious co-host Ryan as always.
Namaste.
Namaste. Today we've got a friend of the show back on, Eisenberg, who obviously we had on before. If you haven't checked out his recent video that we done with him, talking about his story, please go and check that out. It's absolutely inspirational. I think you'll pick a lot of tips from that. But he's obviously what to talk about today, Ryan, what Ethan wants to come on and say is he's obviously taken a new direction, and obviously he's eating disorder advocacy and obviously about mental health. And you're obviously doing things like obviously spirituality related to body image and recovery. So if you just want to take it away, Ethan, and kind of tell us what your kind of new direction is and how it's actually changed and the reasons for that.
Yeah, so I spent quite a while very actively in the recovery community, doing some coaching, doing interviews, making videos myself. And then I kind of took a step back from that to discover life outside of eating disorder recovery, still helping people in my personal life from time to time, which has been very rewarding in and of itself. But over the past, so July is kind of a reflective month for me. July is my 3-year anniversary of getting diagnosed with an eating disorder and then starting recovery. And so over the past 3 years, I have kind of had this evolving journey with my body. And I have really gone back and forth on, is having really good, solid body image necessary and a crucial part of full recovery? And I have come to the conclusion that it is. Having a good relationship with one's body is a really important factor to eating disorder recovery, in my opinion. So I thought that I would come on today and talk about my 4 tips to healing body image and getting onto a good track with one's body image and in my opinion, they're the 4 steps to a good, solid foundation with the human body that we live in. So,
I love it. I love it. No, I think you bring up a good point, because this is something that I've thought about too, and I've dealt with, like, for the last probably now 6 years, is that exact thing, is like dealing with being comfortable in your body and not exactly having to set this expectation of what your body needs to look like to be happy or to be perfect, because I think a lot of people get in trouble with this whole perfection complex. So I'm excited to hear your tips. Let's jump into it.
Yes, I'm very excited. Okay, so first, and I have some notes here with me so that I don't lose my train of thought, because I'm really good at going off on tangents.
Me too.
So I'm going to keep myself on the straight and narrow. All right, so first off, I do invite everyone that's listening to try to accept and find a little bit of love, if they can, for where they are in their relationship to their bodies right now. So not even for the body itself, but just where they are in their relationship to it. So what I mean by that is that if someone that's listening is out of alignment with their body and they're not feeling good, maybe they're in pain, or maybe they're not feeling happy with their weight right now, just to acknowledge that and just say that whatever I'm feeling right now with my body is so valid and it's so okay. And I don't need to be feeling any other way than that. So that's kind of my prerequisite to the whole thing, of just a foundation, because when we're judging where we are with our bodies, we can't move forward, because judgment and love cannot live within the same house. They can't exist at the same time. So we have to start from a place of acceptance, which will then turn into love. So with that out of the way, I will now get into the 4 tips, okay? So the first one is to not overly identify as a body. So this is really important, I think, for everyone, and especially those of us that are in eating disorder recovery. And it's a little bit counterintuitive, because the whole point is to heal body image. So we think that it's going to be really body focused. But I found over the past 3 years that it's been super important to not overly identify as a body. So what that means is that the goal is to separate our values and our morals and our boundaries and our ethics and everything that we are as a person, to separate that from our body, so that we so that we don't overly identify. Because what happens when we have an eating disorder is we get so attached to our bodies, so they become who we are. So the goal is to kind of map out who we are as a person without the body. And a key to that, especially for people with eating disorders, I really recommend having some hobbies or having some interests that are outside of excessive movement of the body. So what that means is like, that's not to say that we can't do things like yoga or things like exercise or any of that good stuff, but like to have some things that aren't completely body oriented. So by that, I mean reading, I mean watching documentaries, getting outside in nature in a non-physically active way, meditating in nature, any of that. That's a really good, not overly identify as the body. And in terms of like spirituality and religion, that you don't have to be spiritual and religious in life, but if you do have a spiritual and or religious backbone, that would be a really great place to start for not overly identifying as the body, to kind of separate like your soul self from your physical body. And if you're not spiritual or religious, then you can say, I'm going to separate my values from my body. Does that make sense?
No.
That totally makes sense. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So that is tip number one. Tip number two is to not attach to the body looking or feeling one way all the time. So what I mean by that is that we are in these amazing, incredible bodies from the time that we're born with muscle and bone and fat, and like they're really kind of remarkable when you think about it, like what they have the ability to do. In that though, they go through cycles, they go through disease, they go through health, they go through the aging process. The body is an evolving being, an evolving mechanism, and it's evolving all the time. It's never not changing. And we cannot control the aging process. We can't control certain things in life. Right now, we're going through a pandemic. We cannot, we can absolutely control our behaviors trying to not get a disease, but at the end of the day, we will have periods of disease and sickness and health and all of that. So when we get attached to the body looking or feeling a certain way all of the time, we're going to experience some suffering, because no matter what we do to try to control it, we never will be able to. So not attaching is a really big part of these 4 tips. And yeah, it's a very big piece. So let me look at my notes for a second. All right, so then what's also involved in this tip is to not judge different states or appearances of the body. So when I'm going to use a personal example for this. Right now in my life, I am working in retail and I'm on the sales floor a lot, and I'm at the register a lot, and I'm kind of shifting my position between ringing things up and then going back to the register, ringing and then going back to the register. So over my time at work, I have started to experience some knee pain, right? So now there's 2 ways that we can look at pain, right? We can look at it in a judgmental way, and I could look at that pain and be like, oh, I have this knee pain, and I got it because I was doing this and I shouldn't have done that. Now I can't go on this hike, or I can't do that and I can't do the other thing. Or we can look at it like, okay, I have this pain and I see it and I acknowledge it and I accept it for what it is. And then when we're in that space of accepting and allowing for that, then we can say, well, what can I do right now? What's the next right thing to make myself feel better? Whether that's icing or doing some strengthening or just resting completely, like that is how we can move forward. But the point is that we wouldn't be able to allow for that space and allow for that acknowledgement without judgment if we're in a constant state of feeling like the body should look and feel a certain way all the time. Now, to relate it away from pain and then a little bit more back to eating disorders, is the body changes, and it changes shape. And sometimes in the seasons it gets bigger and sometimes it gets smaller, and that's okay. And allowing for all of that is good. But when we have an eating disorder, we're like, my body has to look a certain way all of the time too. So then that's also a really dangerous place, because no matter what, our body is going to change. Sometimes our body has to change in order to heal. So we cannot get attached to the body looking and feeling a certain way all the time. That's tip number 2. So before tips 3 and 4, do we want to discuss tips 1 and 2, or should I just keep plowing through?
I really love that, actually, because one thing that you really hit me home there was when you were talking about age, especially.
Mm-hmm.
That's something I've noticed roughly over the last 5 years as I've got near the age of 40, which I just am at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
I'm finding I scrutinise my age an awful lot. I look in the mirror and I do see aging that everybody else doesn't see. Everybody says I look younger. So that's something that I think is really, really good for me to kind of detach from that. And having this, putting labels on myself in a way that I've got to do a certain thing. And like you said, it's like, you talked about your knee injury there as well. I actually have a lateral meniscus tear. I found that I was kind of stepping back from doing certain things. And it's just like you said, it's like making the positives what you can do and things that are not detrimental, obviously, to enrich your life as well. Right.
Exactly. And we don't have to, like, physical pain is physical pain, and it's awful. It sucks. But the real, it becomes this huge beast when we get mentally attached to not having pain. Because when we get mentally attached to not having pain and then pain arises, then we mentally spiral. So when we can just, when we just say, okay, my body is just, it's a body and it's going to experience all these things, and we expect it to feel different ways at different times, then we can just look at the physical pain. Then we don't have the whole mental spiral as well. So yeah.
I think that's something that Ryan can probably relate to quite a lot, obviously, with your autoimmune problems and obviously.
Yeah. I mean, all I was going to say with that is that I think, and this is something that I've talked about a lot just on my own and with other people, is that you don't have to accept that you can't improve your life, but I feel like you need to accept your current situation, like you mentioned, and kind of take that where it is, because like you said, and I think that goes beyond eating disorders, with people wanting to feel a certain way all the time. You have to accept that you don't have that control. Like once you can accept that you are comfortable with not having control, that's kind of where things get better. Exactly.
So to recap, in the steps so far, we have don't overly identify as a body, and then second was to don't attach to the body looking or feeling a certain way all the time. So that brings us to step number 3 in my little guide to healthy body image. And that is, forget what you think you need when it comes to what a healthy body should look like. So forgetting what you think a healthy body should look like is so important when it comes to developing healthy body image, because when the ego comes in, and it starts giving us an image, and it starts giving us comparison, and it starts telling us what it thinks a body should look like based on our insecurities and based on our just beliefs that have been instilled in us by diet culture or regular culture or whatever it is. We have been conditioned to believe that a healthy body looks a certain way. So the reason that in developing healthy body image, forgetting that image is so important, or at least when it comes up, dismissing it, is because that blocks our doorway to intuition. And intuition is what guides us to having the healthiest body that we can have. And that will look different on everybody. So when we're in line with our values, and like we have already detached from the body, and we separate our soul selves from the body, then suddenly we've opened this doorway to our intuition, which can then lead us in the direction of basically feeding and moving our bodies in an appropriate way for us. And little side note here, even though I said that I wouldn't go off on a tangent, when I say intuition, I do not mean intuitive eating, and I do not mean intuitive exercise. I am not a huge fan of those terms because it kind of contradicts intuition. So what I mean by that is that intuitive eating, let's say, if we're like focused on intuitive eating and we're like overly focused on our body's hunger and fullness cues, then we're like not really in line with our intuition in any other aspect of our lives, and everything else kind of falls by the wayside. So like, if I'm really focused on my intuitive eating, and like, what happens to my intuition being like, oh, maybe I'm gonna go to lunch with a person at this time, but it's not really when I'm hungry, but like that doesn't really matter. So like, I hope that made sense, but I'm not a huge fan of the term intuitive eating. It's more intuitive living and just being in line with our intuition. Anywho, so our intuition is though what leads us on a path to eating and moving in an appropriate way. So, but that's not like I eat when I'm hungry, I stop when I'm full. That's more like, oh, in this season, I'm feeling more like lying on the couch all the time and eating a lot of chocolate. As this season comes along, I feel a little bit more active and energetic, and maybe I crave some fruit. So like that's okay. I hope that made sense. But
That makes sense.
all right. So the third tip was to forget what. Okay, good. So that was forget what you think you need when it comes to a healthy body, releasing the ego's definition of a healthy body, and moving more in line with the intuition. And then when we are in line with our intuition, suddenly it just kind of falls into place. It just happens. And the important thing is when we start to feel good, it doesn't matter how we look. It doesn't matter what society says that we should look like. It's this knowing that I am well, okay? And that is a feeling that is better than looking a certain way, in my opinion.
Well, and then just to add on to that, I've also grown to know that people that are in a constant, and this is true for myself as well, people that are in a constant chase for a certain like body image are never truly happy, even when they've quote achieved it. It never ends. And this is something I've talked about with people that do like bodybuilding and stuff like that. Like it never ends, the pursuit. So what you said is very important with that, finding that level of appreciation for yourself.
I was just actually going to put in one little point, if I could there.
Yeah.
Obviously talking about intuitive eating and obviously, like you said, intuitive exercise.
Yeah.
What would you say to people, because the lines are quite blurred there. A lot of people don't actually know what the difference is there. How would you say for them to disconnect and actually know what is intuitive exercise or what is things overtaking them?
Yep. So that's a really good point. So for people with eating disorders, exercise and eating, but we're going to talk about exercise right now, becomes this monster, okay, in my opinion. So it becomes something that you feel like you have to do, and it's a compulsion, and that is valid. I've been there, and most people with eating disorders will experience it at some point or another. Now, when we're healing from an eating disorder, it can get even more difficult because we're told move when it feels good, exercise when it feels good, move intuitively. And so then, but if we're not fully healed yet, we're like, well, I think this is my intuition and I think it feels good right now, but it could also be compulsive, and I'm not sure if it's not compulsive. So and that's why I'm not a huge fan of the terms intuitive eating and intuitive exercise, because when we're saying I'm going to exercise intuitively, what happens is that we become hyper focused on the body, thereby forgetting steps 1 and 2. And then when we're hyper focused, then it's like, okay, well, I feel like I want to exercise right now, so I'm going to, and then, oh, maybe I'm a little sore, so I won't exercise today. And then, oh, and I feel like I was a little bit not moving enough yesterday, so I'm going to move to, and that's not what we want. So that brings me to how to differentiate the difference. And that is a break from exercise, a complete and total rest from exercise. And here's why. When we've been in a space of pushing and a space of exercising compulsively, constantly, even if it's not constant or even qualified as over exercise by eating disorder professionals or health professionals, but we know that it's been compulsive and we're vibrating on that energy and we know that it's compulsive deep down, we need to take a break and we need to just treat it as an experiment and say, well, I'm just going to play around and see what life looks like in this space of rest right now. I'm going to rest my body, make a commitment to resting my body for 1, 2, 3 months, not weeks, months, for a year. I don't know. It depends on how long you've had an eating disorder. It depends on the level of your exercise compulsion when you had an eating disorder, and it depends on what your medical professionals are saying. But a break from exercise, even for people without eating disorders, even for healthy people, since I've been recovered, I've taken breaks from exercise just because that's life sometimes. Like, playing around with resting the body and treating it like fun, like, oh, let's just see what life looks like when I take out that factor right now. There's nothing wrong with that. We have a whole lifetime to move our bodies. We have a whole lifetime to experiment with what movement feels good and what feels good in the body. What's wrong with rest? And why can we not experiment with what kind of rest feels good? Like, instead of like, oh, okay, I'm intuitively exercising and I'm going to do a dance class today, and then I'm going to do weights tomorrow, and I'm going to do running the next day. Why can't we just say, I'm experimenting with rest right now, and I'm going to watch Netflix today. I'm going to meditate tomorrow. I'm going to sit on the couch the next day. Like, I don't care. Like, for people that are healing from eating disorders, take a break, commit to a break, and have fun in the break to the best of your ability, because that's how to rewire that compulsion. And then when the break is over, then you can start experimenting with what kind of movement actually feels good. And after a break, then you will know what is your intuition and what is not your intuition. And also within that break, if you do have a spiritual background and you're working on your values and all of that, get connected again, and work on steps 1 and 2, which is don't overly identify as a body and don't attach to a body appearance or looking a certain way all the time. And then in that break and that self-discovery, after that's done, I'm pretty confident that people will be able to differentiate what is intuitive exercise and what is not. So did that make sense?
That's absolutely fantastic. It's really good. It's really good to hear a different perspective, because in the last podcast we had Miles Sandoval on, who was a physiotherapist. She was talking about. She was actually talking about this. She helps her clients in recovery actually incorporate exercise. So that's part of the thing that she does. She basically shows them how to find a healthy balance. But for me personally, if that had been the case, and I was to incorporate exercise at the early stages of my recovery, I probably would have never recovered. So I think as well, I think it's a non-descriptive thing. It's individual, and what works for one person doesn't work for another.
Exactly.
Ryan could relate to that as well.
Yeah, I mean, I totally relate to it, and I've it's really given me a perspective over the last year about like just how compulsive I actually was, even after I thought I was like recovered or whatever, because I was in this really false, and even like the last like few weeks, basically the last month, my exercise has been really pretty limited to like just like really basic stuff. I'll go on a walk with my family or something, and then I've actually implemented some of those other things that you just mentioned about finding other hobbies that you enjoy to replace that time. I've been playing video games with my brother, which I haven't played video games in like 2 years, so it's been a real knockback. So I think that's important. And what you mentioned earlier, I just want to put an extra emphasis on about finding a hobby that you enjoy outside of anything that has to do with recovery or health or any of that stuff. For me, that's making videos on another YouTube channel that has nothing to do with health or any of that stuff. And everyone has something different. But I think that's like a crucial part to any of it, because it takes your mind completely away from it.
Absolutely. And that really is why it's my belief that when we heal who we are as a person and we find who we are outside of the body, then we don't overthink intuitive eating and intuitive exercise. Then it happens. So that's why, like, I've written the steps out, and like they build on one another, because we can't live intuitively until we've done the other things, which is not attaching ourselves to the body. So I guess that will bring me to the fourth and final step, which is knowing that you are enough right now. Okay? We are inherently enough just by existing on planet Earth. And that might sound like hippy dippy and like super spiritual, but it's really just, if you think about it, common sense. We are of this planet, like trees and flowers and dirt and cats and whatever. We are here with nature. Autumn Brienne is a fabulous spiritual teacher on YouTube, And I've been lucky enough to talk to her. I was just talking with her last night. I haven't been coached by her, but I just love her videos and like all of that stuff. And she has made quite a few videos on how the body is nature, not like nature, but it is nature. So like we, you know, are part of this planet. And just like we wouldn't look at a tree that is a little bit crooked or bent, like every tree looks different and is unique and all of that. And every animal and every, you know, flower, all of that stuff is enough and good enough just by existing. Even trees that are diseased, or that are ill, or that are dying, or that, you know, all of that, all of nature is just so enough just by being, because we're all part of this planet. And so are our bodies. Like, why are our bodies any exception from enough just by existing? There's literally no reason for us to feel like we aren't enough, physically and mentally, but especially physically. So it's like, and one thing that I like to tell people, I mean, the topic of body image has been coming up in my personal life, like with family members and friends and stuff that have never had eating disorders. It's just, body image is such a big thing for everyone. And I've started to just, and you know, people come to me for advice and stuff just because I've had such a struggle with body image. So like, what I've come to tell people is when you attack yourself, you're kind of attacking everything else. Because if we're all one unit, if we're all on this planet, if we're all nature, like, and we have that energy of like, we're like, oh, like, I don't like this body. Like, oh, like what? Like, we don't like a part of our planet. Like, does that make sense?
Totally.
So so that's really what I've come out on in terms of just like knowing, like, I really am enough, and not because that phrase gets thrown around a lot of just kind of like, you are enough, love yourself.
Always.
But it's like really like a knowing, like a soul knowing of I am enough just by being here, not by doing anything, not by being, you know, yoga girl that's standing on her head at the beach, or by eating a certain way, or even by feeling good. We don't have to feel good to be enough. We can be sick. We can be overweight, underweight, perfect weight, whatever. Like, we can be whatever and still be enough just by existing. So that's my fourth step, is to really, really internalize that. And again, I believe that starts to develop, that knowledge starts to develop after we do the other things, which were don't overly identify, don't attach to the body looking one way all the time, forget what you think you need when it comes to a healthy body. And then we start to really internalize after those, wow, I am part of nature and I am enough. So that's the fourth step.
No, that's brilliant.
That's absolutely great. That was one that really hit home to me, actually, because though I consider myself recovered, I must admit, I really do beat myself up constantly about thinking that I'm not enough. I'm constantly in this search of having a purpose. And I don't know why I define myself like that, but I'm always scrutinizing my life and thinking, what's my purpose here? I'm not doing any good. Why am I still here? What am I going to do? What's my future? But I think you've really put it into perspective that just being here, we are enough. We're here for a reason.
Yeah,
that's pretty
exactly.
That's pretty
by existing.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting too, Tommy, because I thought about that a lot for a long time, like the whole purpose thing. And then I had a thought one day that was kind of funny, where I was like, you know, there's been billions of people that really didn't have a really like a purpose, and they were fine. So that's just kind of like what I look at it. But I think too, purpose changes every day. Like, my purpose today may not be the same as tomorrow. So
absolutely. And I think that the reason that identity becomes, and purpose or whatever it is, becomes so big for people that have eating disorders specifically, and I hope that this rings true for people that are watching, when we have an eating disorder, we cannot help but identify as that eating disorder. It is who we are, and it gives us a purpose. An eating disorder, you wake up every day, you count your calories, you do a certain amount of exercise for a certain amount of time, you know, that's how you function, that's how you exist, and that feels like a purpose. And in some way it is, because that's through the lens that you're looking at it, and that's your purpose, that you've made it your purpose. And there's nothing, I mean, even that I say, okay, don't just accept it, accept that that's, you know, I had to get to the point where I was like, I just accept that that's what I built for myself, and I can ship this if I want to. Like, but anyway, my thing with that is that because we have such an identity as a person with an eating disorder, then when we make a commitment to not being the person with an eating disorder, then it's like, oh my gosh, who am I? And like, there's this like existential crisis basically of like, what am I doing here? And it just really like, we can find so much peace when we just say, I don't have to do anything. And I don't mean like you don't have to do anything. Like, yes, being a functioning human being is wonderful. But like, we don't have to do anything special. We don't have to identify as one way to be enough. Okay. So, and like, yes, that's a very like spiritual soul kind of thing, but like that really applies to the human body when it comes to having good body image, because like, these bodies are enough. Just like we as humans don't have to have a purpose, our bodies don't have to fit into a certain mold, because everything really is unique and nothing is going to stay the same. Everything is temporary.
Yeah, I think once you identify those things about yourself is when you truly can say that you are on that recovering path. Once you kind of recognize that you yourself are unique, but also the same as everybody else.
Exactly. And like, just accepting the ebbs and flows of existence is something that people with eating disorder, like when I had an eating disorder, I could not tolerate, like, forget the body, I couldn't tolerate different levels of emotion. Like, I had to like, an eating disorder, I've come to believe, is a way of emotionally regulating oneself. Like, when you're fixated on food and exercise, it blocks out everything else. There's no moving through happiness, joy, sadness, anger. There's none of that. And that's the beauty of the human experience. Like, we're here on planet Earth to have the full range of those experiences, to be able to eat delicious food and be joyful and to like have fun with our loved ones, and then also to be angry and miserable sometimes and depressed and all of that. Like, we have the ability to do all of that, and that's wonderful. So it's like, when we have an eating disorder, we block ourselves not only from feeling the sadness, because when I had an eating disorder, I didn't feel sad, I was just numb.
Yep.
So like,
totally.
So right, and then you're also blocking out all the joy. So when in recovery, forget, intuitive eating and intuitive exercise. Instead of intuitive eating and intuitive exercise, what if we were to just say, let's see how much I can start celebrating joy and how much I can start celebrating sadness, and like start to really feel those emotions and start to really enjoy the process of being a human. And then when we can start enjoying the ebbs and flows of our like internal weather, if you want to call it that, to kind of stick with the nature analogy, once we can start enjoying the process of those ebbs and flows, then we can start enjoying the process of our body's ebbs and flows. We can start enjoying, like, when we're in a recovered, healthy body, we can start enjoying noticing how, oh my gosh, in this season, I gain weight to feel more comfortable naturally without thinking about it. Like, my body puts on some extra fat in the winter and I feel cozy and comfortable sitting on the couch and eating chocolate. And like, then like, as the summer comes along, some of that goes away and I'm a little bit more active. And like, we change with the seasons, we cycle. So so like, we can start enjoying the ebbs and flows of the body. We can start enjoying like sickness and health when we don't berate ourselves for being sick and like having a cold or something. I mean, like, oh, like now I can't do that. And now I can't do this. Just being like, I'm sick and like, this sucks. And then when I'm healthy, I'm going to celebrate that. So like, all of that stuff is good. All the contrast is good. And whether it's the body or the emotions, that's really what I've kind of come out on in terms of like having a good image of oneself. Yeah.
Yeah, I can totally relate because they're all fitting labels to myself and things like that. Even Tabitha actually said it recently as well. She said the biggest thing you done was actually removing labels and removing yourself as this vegan person or this anorexic or anything like that, because that did keep me stuck, and it was changing my belief system, doing what was right for me, and actually disconnecting from all that. But it's been really, really hard trying to find myself again. And it's only been the last year that I've actually found my purpose, that I'm a human being, that I'm a husband, that I'm a cousin, I've got a life, I've got friends. This is what I'm here for. And my purpose, like Ryan just said earlier on, it constantly evolves each and every single day. And what it is today, it's not going to be tomorrow. So
exactly.
Christianity, I would say, was a big, big part of my recovery.
Beautiful.
That made a massive actually part. Obviously, can I devote my life to a higher purpose, and it's always been about that. So like I say, do what works for you.
Right. And it's the kind of thing that, like, your purpose, my purpose, anyone's purpose can just be like having peace, and being a peaceful presence, or because that will go on to the next person. So like when we operate in a certain way and we're feeling a certain way, that's contagious. Like when we feel good about ourselves, that really will radiate onto the next person, and then that person will bring it onto the next person, and then and it's like this beautiful chain, this beautiful cycle and capability that we have as humans that is undeniable. Like when you're in the presence of somebody that you're like, wow, they've got it going on, like they feel good, like that, you cannot help but catch that just a little bit.
I'm catching it.
Oh, good. I'm so glad. and then that goes on to the next person. And like, that's a purpose. Like that is a way to live with purpose of like, I want to show up as like, I want to show up for other humans and then have them show up for other humans. And like, that's a purpose. There doesn't need to be any fancy schmancy, like I'm a this or I'm a that or I'm the, like, no, just like be a human, and that's your purpose. Yeah.
We need more humans out there. That's all we need.
More humans.
But I really appreciate you coming back on.
That is the goal of today, get more humans into the world. But yeah, no,
I appreciate you coming back on and sharing those 4 tips, because I think that was also not only enlightening for us, but I think probably a bunch of other people. I know I'm
so glad.
I was taking notes.
Good. Oh my gosh, I'm so glad.
So all the stuff where you want to find Ethan, we'll have it all in the description down below as usual. Ethan, any final words?
We will do it.
Yep. You can just follow me on Instagram if you want, or don't. Maybe just stalk my Instagram and then never follow me. It doesn't matter.
Dude. not gonna say I haven't.
Cancel culture.
Beautiful. Yeah. But
thanks again, Ethan.
Great to see you guys again. This was so much fun.
Likewise.
Come on. Yeah. Thank you for having me.